Hello, welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I've decided to become more organized and I'm showing you how I do a rose in 6 steps, and this is only about 20-25 minutes long, this video. So hey, here we go. So step 1 is to paint the background. I'm using a 9x12 canvas panel and acrylic paints, and I paint the background in sort of color blocks is the best way to describe it, with French ultramarine blue, primary yellow, raw sienna, raw umber. I mix and match the colors. Sometimes I use a green, sometimes I put alizarin crimson in there, and when I've got the color on the canvas, I use titanium white and blend that in to make the whole thing more opaque because it's rather transparent, as you can see. I'll put my palette up at the end of the video so you can see which colors I use and how I arrange them on my palette. I like to use a powder brush for blending, and you can get them from the dollar store for $1 each, and they work wonderfully well. Highly recommend them. This method works for many different colored backgrounds. You can use lighter or darker paints and get the effects that you want for whatever particular subject you're painting. I'm using a liner brush here with raw sienna, and step 2 is to sketch out where my rose and the leaves and the buds are going to be. Now, although I do this, sometimes I change things up as I go along, but using raw sienna works very well because you don't really see it at the end of the painting. It just sort of is such a nice neutral that it sort of blends in. It just adds color to the painting. So that's why I use raw sienna. I lost a little bit of my video here, but I used alizarin crimson to put on the base coat of the roses, and I'll do all the base colors of the leaves without any light or shadow, and the roses without any petals. That is the 3rd step. I'm using sap green and a liner brush to reinforce my stems. And I'm just putting blobs of green paint on where the leaves would be. Nothing special at this point. I consider this part of step 3, the base coat. I like to put dark green under the rose itself. When I pull the petals across, they pull in some of the green and it makes the petals look translucent, and I like that effect. While the pink paint is still damp, I'll use titanium white to pull in my petals from the outer edge down toward the center of the rose. The white paint loses its brightness as it dries down, so I usually go over the petals a few times to reinforce it. For the petals of which we only see the tops, I just do a sideways swipe, and that's good enough to represent a petal. I was going to make this top rose a bud, but I decided it would be nicer to show you how I paint a rose from the back so that you really see a little bit of the petals and you see the sepals. I mix sap green, primary yellow, a little bit of raw sienna to bring the green down, and some titanium white, and that gives me a nice natural shade of green for the leaves and the sepals and the stems too. I use it on the stems, although I also use alizarin and French ultramarine blue and raw umber on the stems. When I'm painting the leaves, I pull them from the outer edge in toward that center vein. I think that looks quite natural. One of the nicest things about painting with acrylics is if you don't like something, you can paint over it, and it's not too much of a bother to do that. Don't feel you have to confine your painting to the first sketch that you made. If you think you need more leaves or perhaps another rose or a bud, you can put that in afterwards. I mean, it's your painting. You can do what you like. And I often do. I hardly ever get my sketch right first time. I'm using my liner brush. It's also called a rigger, and it's great for putting in things like stems or sepals, as I'm doing here. I'm at the point of the painting where I've got everything on the canvas, and now I need to add highlights and shadow to define the picture a little more. And I'm using my liner and raw umber to reinforce my stems. I'm using my liner brush and some alizarin crimson, and I'm going to put that on my stems. I like to put alizarin in my paintings because I feel it makes the painting lively. I don't know what it is about alizarin, but it perks up a painting no end. And I don't think I've done a painting in a long time where I haven't used alizarin in there somewhere. And the other color I like to put in shadows and on things like stems or leaves is French ultramarine blue. It has a similar, if slightly more subdued effect, and it adds just a nice, I don't know what to say, liveliness is the best word I can think of. It just adds that little something that makes the picture pop. I've more or less done everything I can except put in my shadows and highlights, and I'm doing that now. I've decided the light is coming from the right. I should have said that earlier on. And so all the right side of the leaves and the stems and the buds will be in a paler green, and then I'll use probably either raw umber or French ultramarine blue, or maybe both, to darken the shadow side of the leaves. I'm mixing French ultramarine blue and sap green for my darkest green for the parts of the leaves that are in deep shadow. I'm using a large flat to pull in more titanium white over my petals to brighten them up a little bit. As the paint dries, it dulls down somewhat, so I usually do this 2 or 3 times. I should say too that you can add extra petals anytime. I've quite often add extra ones between the large ones that I'm painting now and the ones above, and it gives me a fuller rose. I like to paint these old-fashioned full-blown roses. I need a smaller brush to put in the tiny petals in the center, so I'm using a small filbert brush to do that. It's not very tiny actually, it's probably about a 1/4 inch. I'm adding a little pink to this rose, just to where the petal meets the stem, I guess. We only see the back of this rose, so it needs every little thing that we can give it. We see mostly the sepals and the backs of the petals, so I don't want to lose anything, which is why I'm putting the pink back in. At this point in my painting, I'm mostly adding in lights and shadow, reinforcing my highlights and my shadows, and fixing up any little things that I feel need fixing. Basically, the painting is finished, but that's one of the hardest things, is to recognize that it's finished and you don't need to do anything else to it. I can see that I need to put thorns on there. I do thorns by making a straight horizontal line and then pulling down a line at an angle and putting the thorns on opposite sides of the stem alternately, and I think that looks quite realistic. I should say that I think of my paintings as expressionist more than anything, and I don't really go for realism, but I don't like things to look odd. If the stem looks too weak, I always add raw umber, because that does wonderful things to strengthen up a shrub rose, which is what these are. I'm swiping in some more colour on the leaves because I feel they look a little constricted, a little on the tight side, and I think they look better if you just sort of casually swipe on some color without being too picky about it. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well. When you're painting with acrylics, you don't have to worry if you make a mistake. You can always paint over it and blend in. Nobody will notice. And that's one of the nicest things about using acrylic paint. I use a primary yellow and alizarin crimson to mix a highlight for my stems. When you're talking about a woody shrub, you don't want anything too stark for a highlight color, and I find orange works well in this case. I think that my leaves need a brighter highlight, so this is yellow with a little bit of green and titanium white in it. It's mostly a yellow color, which makes the leaves pop. I'm putting in the sepals with raw umber first of all, and then I'll add raw sienna, maybe some alizarin crimson, and maybe an orangey colour on top. I like to mix up the colour. It looks more realistic. I meant to say stamens, not sepals. I've decided my stems need a little more alizarin, and it sort of got lost when I put the raw umber on there. I just can't get over how much it brightens the picture up. Really, this painting is finished and I'm just picking away at it now, which is a problem for me. I have a hard time stepping back and letting the painting go. I've decided that the dark of the leaves needs to be richer, and I like to use French ultramarine blue for that. You can use raw umber and it does have a nice effect, but the blue is a little bit like the alizarin. It just adds that pop of colour, that adds that liveliness to the painting, and I don't know how else to describe it. But it charms my eye, and I hope it charms everybody else's too. After sitting with the painting for a little while, I realised that it needed extra leaves on that bud, so I did that and I think it's improved. Here's my palette of titanium white, primary yellow, raw sienna, raw umber, French ultramarine blue, sap green and alizarin crimson. So that's it, I finally managed to drag myself away. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please leave me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button if you did, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.